right, so was that a keynote or was that a sermon? Yes, let's go ahead and give another round of applause and an amen to our keynote speaker. So good morning, everyone. How are we feeling? So by a show of hands, how many of you are at this Stigma conference for the very first time ever? Ooh, it's a good number of you. Well, welcome. And hopefully others of you are veteran participants like myself. I want to say it's been almost 15 years of the 16-year history. Right, Dr. Rana? I literally have been here since the beginning. Thank you for the invitation to return every year. And to Patty, thank you so much. So I'm really excited that I was invited to serve as the moderator for this panel on the heels of that discussion on the power of storytelling. That's exactly what we're going to do, right? We're going to actually hear some stories that connect us back to the conference theme. So I'm going to go ahead and invite all three of our panelists, if they're here. Is Daniel Garza here? Come on up, please. And then I see John Bailey. Come on up. And then finally, we have Tammy Kinney. Hey, okay. So as they make their ways up here, I just wanted to share just a little bit about myself, and then basically I will take some time to introduce each of our panelists for those of you who are unfamiliar with the powerhouse that each of them are. And I think we have a couple of mics, so we'll just go pass those around. Okay, so my name is Dr. Miranda Ward. I'm actually a Cali girl by heart, but I'm a transplant to DC. But I will say I actually, planted some roots here in DC. I've been here for almost 20 years now. Proud Ward 7 homeowner. And yes, thank you, appreciate the love. And so I often describe myself as a community educator. Even though, yes, I'm an assistant professor and director of equity in the Department of Clinical Research and Leadership in the School of Medicine and Health Sciences at the George Washington University, DC remains my classroom. So all of the courses that I teach, undergraduate public health courses, are community engaged courses. And I also serve as the executive director and co-founder of a youth development pipeline called Promising Futures. And those youth are also veteran participants in this conference. They often are invited to actually give these kind of riveting performance-based workshops. They ultimately put the justice in health. And so I'm used to having those equity-based, justice-based conversations like the one we're getting ready to have today. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to be here to introduce our panelists. Shout out to the DC CFAR. I'm also a member, a researcher in that community. So up first, we're going to hear from Daniel Garza, and you actually can find all of their bios in the app, but I'll go ahead and take the liberty of going ahead to introduce them. So Daniel Garza is actually a community leader. He's a patient leader for over 20 years. He speaks publicly about HIV, anal cancer, and mental health. He shares his story through campaigns such as Positively Fearless, works with NMAC as a language justice consultant, and chairs the Client Advisory Committee for Radiant Health Centers. Through his company, is it Lil Mexican? Okay, Little Mexican Productions Incorporated, Daniel and his partner Christian produce live stream content that is geared towards adding positive messages to HIV, cancer, and LGBTQ communities. He's also a certified life coach with a focus on spirituality. He's an actor, a published author, and his book, Grumpy Bunny and the Colors Game, is a guided meditation book for children. So we're definitely in for a treat in hearing from Daniel. Next, we also are going to be hearing from Johnny Bailey, who is a community outreach coordinator at HIPS. And so he describes himself as a community outreach coordinator that really began his journey later in life after years of addiction and mental illness really led to rock bottom. And while he was in rehab, he met someone who introduced him to SMART recovery. And you can tell us a little bit more about that, which showed an option that was not just 12 steps or death. After getting sober, Johnny returned to school to receive a degree in social work, where he focused on alternative addiction treatments with the mission of helping others find a path that works for them. Currently, like I said, he is the community outreach coordinator at HIPS, where he started hosting SMART meetings, as well as hosting panels and classes on alternative treatment methods, Narcan, harm reduction, and de-escalation. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Tammy Kinney, who is an entrepreneur and storyteller. Executive director, works in behavioral health and substance use disorder. She's a forensic case manager, certified peer specialist in mental health, and a long-term survivor. She was initially diagnosed in 1987 with AIDS and is the founder of Rural Women in Action in Georgia. So let's go ahead and give a warm welcome to all of our panelists today. Okay, so this is how this panel will work. Basically, I'm going to turn it over to each of them to share their stories around disclosure, harm, and healing. And they each have 10 minutes each. And then we will stop it and just open it up for question and answer. Sound like a plan? I will be keeping time. So just to make sure that we have opportunity to engage with, our family here. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll start with you, Daniel.
Sure.
Okay.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel G. Garza. I'm originally from Monterrey, Mexico, for all my Mexican people out there. I grew up in Texas. I live in Laguna Beach, California now. My story started in Houston. I was diagnosed officially with AIDS back in 2000. And for anybody of that era knows that our paperwork, CDC kept track of us and they knew who we were. So I didn't know this when I was first diagnosed, but I found out over time that the CDC knew who I was. So I may be followed right now. Please don't say anything. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. I think I feel like a disclaimer. Like, I do stand-up comedy and I talk a lot about my health issues because I feel that that's a great way to break down the stigma. If I make fun of the situation, not of myself, it creates a bond between people, and I think that's a great way to break down stigma, which is what we're talking about today. So if I say something funny, you are welcome to laugh, please. Boost my ego. But so continue with the story. So when I was diagnosed, all my family knew about HIV and AIDS was actually from a show. If you know, that time there was a show called Cristina on Univision. Yes, if you were nodding, yeah. Cristina was the Latino Oprah, and anything Cristina said was law. We inducted it. And when she had a show about HIV and AIDS, there really wasn't that much information, and all my family knew was that AIDS was the same thing as HIV, and HIV was contagious, and if they touched me, they were gonna die. So when I was diagnosed with AIDS, it was very scary for them to try to figure out what was going on. As you can tell, I'm Latino, Mexican, and we come with a lot of baggage. When we cross the border, we don't leave it behind. We bring all of our culture, our religion, and social norms, and that carries a lot because we believe traditions, we believe what the church tells us, we believe what our grandfathers, our grandparents told us. We don't leave that behind. We leave a lot of things at the border, but we don't leave any of that. So it was very difficult for my parents to understand, first of all, that I was gay when I was 17, and then now you have AIDS. Like, what's that going to do to the family? So everything was under wraps. They didn't say anything. Now, I'm going to say this, that it was less scary for them when I had cancer. But it was not okay to say anal cancer. You have cancer. Because, oh my God, like, now you're gay and you have HIV and anal cancer. What else are you going to bring to the family? So it's been very difficult. I'm 52 now, so I've been dealing with all of the culture and the religious stuff and the social norms since I was 17. So it's been kind of difficult. But that is precisely why when I was diagnosed, it took me about 6 months to actually get back to volunteering. I was put on disability right away. I weighed 110 pounds and my T cells were 108 when I was diagnosed. So I was very skinny. I mean, right now I'm like 120 maybe, like, just agree with me, all right? Just miss my ego. But I was very sick, and by the time I got to go back to work, I realized, this is in South Texas, I realized, first of all, if anybody's been to South Texas, it's a couple of years behind the rest of the country. The information that we get there is not at the same level. And for every one pamphlet of HIV information in Spanish, there was like 20 in English. So I thought, wow, this is why we're not getting the information that we need, because we don't have the information. So as a volunteer, I was like, I'm gonna start translating some of these. I'm gonna start printing them out. And people started getting the information. Then people started realizing that I don't have an edit button, and I just talk. And I'm echoing. People started inviting me to present. And my very, very first presentation was at the community college, and I got to talk to young men, 18 to 24, about HIV. And this is a true story. I would welcome them to my table, and I would shake their hand. And I was like, hey, do you know about HIV and AIDS? And they're like, no. I'm like, yes. And I said, do you know anybody who's HIV positive? And they're like, no. I'm like, yes, you do. And they're like, I do. I'm like, yeah. I said, in fact, I'm going to bet you $100 that today you've shaken hands with somebody who has HIV. And you would see them start thinking like, no. This is South Texas. No, vato. Like I say, like I don't know nobody. And I'm like, I'm going to bet you $1,000 that this morning you've already shaken hands, spoken to somebody who's HIV positive. And they were like, pues I know this dude. Maybe he's one of those gays. And maybe he has HIV. And I'm like, that could be. But it's a lot closer than you think. And they'd be like, no. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, who? I'm like, me. And the first thing they would do is go, and on the table, we had a bottle of sanitizer. And I would look them in the guy and go, that's not going to save you now. And the fear, but that would open the conversation. That would open the conversation. It was like, what are you talking about? I said, let me show you a pamphlet. Let me talk to you. Here's some condoms. And that's how it started. But I realized early on that because I am that middle ground between Mexican traditions and being Americanized, that I had to embrace that. I am not one or the other. I am both. I'm like that when you go to like a buffet place and they have the swirl ice cream. I'm that. You can't separate it. You can't separate. I'm vanilla and chocolate all in one. Delicious. With a little bit of nuts up on top. And I feel like when it comes to stigma, shame, disclosing, I'm very respectful of the traditions that I have. They make me the man that I am today. I'm very grateful of the religion that I was raised under. I still embrace some of it. But I have to push my community out of their comfort zone. I agree, it's okay to go meet them where they are, but then I need to push them out of that safe zone. Because many times, and my story, please, if you have any issues, call my lawyer. But my story is that for my family, I had to go to my family and go, yes, God, macho, this is the way we were raised. But it's not all true. It's not all true. So why don't you come out and see the way that I see things? And it's okay. If you don't like it, you can always go back. You can always go back into that comfort zone if you want. But it's like I'm also 16 years clean and sober. Thank you. Yes. Took me 16 years to get there. So, but like they taught me in AA when I went, they were like, come in for a meeting, come in and read, come in and join. And if you don't like it, you can go back. The bars and the drug dealers will always be there. So I tell the people that I work with, come over for a minute, come in and see the other side of the story. See what we do, see how we live, see how it is on this side. And that goes for HIV, anal cancer. I was diagnosed with PTSD due to mental health in 2018. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that I thought PTSD was soldiers and policemen and firemen. And then my doctor said, it's because every time something happens, your body reacts and it's stress. I live in constant stress over things, and I don't know why. I'm exhausted of it. I was in my hotel room this morning, panicking, and I was like, "What if you call sick? What if you tell them you're sick? They can't make you go. Like, they can't make you." And then I was like, "No, call the Uber. You need to go. You need to go." So before we finish, my part is, if you're Latino and we bring a lot of baggage when we cross. Or if you're the child of an immigrant, there's a lot of things that we have to unfold. We have to find a way to make it fit into this American culture that we want to be part of. But my message to my family is come out for a little bit. Just come out of the comfort zone. See how we are. And if you don't like it, you can always go back. But they'll never go back the way that they came out. And that's a step in the right direction. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, America. Hello, America. I am that girl who was diagnosed in 1987 with an initial diagnosis of AIDS. I had 11 T cells. I am also that girl who has spent 15 years in and out of prison and jail. I am also that girl who was an IV drug user. I am that girl that has 3 sons, and I'm going somewhere with this because this is what this conference is talking about. I'm also that girl that has 3 sons. I have 2 baby daddies. Not only am I diagnosed with an initial AIDS diagnosis, I also was diagnosed with hepatitis C. I also was diagnosed with HPV. So I walked up under the umbrella of shame, guilt, internal stigma, hatred, self-hatred. I carried that umbrella half of my life, and I am 64 years old, and I carried that umbrella. But today, I closed the umbrella, and I learned how to walk in the rain. And it is a beautiful thing. The best thing about it, I can change wigs. When one get wet, I just put on another one. But when we talk about stigma, for me, I had to learn how to address my internal stigma. It was the lens that I was looking through and looking at myself. How I felt about Tammy, I thought the world felt the same way. And I could not see any healing in that, especially when you come from a family that has a history of trauma. Everything stays in the house, sweep it up under the rug, and then you nail it down with some nails. So it was no way for me to be open with my status. I was ashamed for me. But then I realized as the years start rolling by and I thought it was never a safe space for me to be in, don't ever think that. I found a safe space. And when I found that safe space, I began to listen. I began to learn. I began to realize my own self-biases. I realized through all of that, I really didn't even like who I was. And that right there sent me into depression. So I walked around so many years without being mentally diagnosed. And for me, that is a horrible thing, along with eternal stigma and living with multiple diagnoses. But today is a new day. I see the light at the tunnel. I see it. I'm not afraid of it. I embrace it. I have wonderful colleagues and friends and associates and organizations, and they're sitting right here in this room. So we don't ever say you're alone or you don't have anybody. Sometimes we don't reach out. But here's the catch right here. For me, I learned how to share my status. And this is only for me, people. The reason why I don't use the word disclose, because it was traumatizing to me, and I had to learn that. Because when you've been in and out of the jailhouse, when the detectives get through talking to you, they'll say, well, you know, she disclosed that she did that and she was over there. And I didn't know that that was traumatizing to me. So I used the word share. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was having a conversation. He's in here, everybody know him, Mr. Brian Jones. And we was having this discussion about sharing. And I'm like, okay, Brian. But then I start thinking, why was I so afraid to use the word disclosure? Because it connected me to a past life that I no longer live, people. I no longer live, excuse me. So I'm going to close with this. I live in a rural area. And I made the decision that I was going to tell the whole world that I'm diagnosed with advanced HIV. And I didn't care who said anything about it. And I think I'm safe to call this lady, I'm going to call her by her last name. She called me on the phone, Miss Kitchens. And she said, if anybody say anything about you, I'm going to catch a flight and I'm coming to that little bitty town that you live in, and I'm going to do battle. I said, okay, my sister. But I was sitting on the back porch. And this is why storytelling, living in your truth, walking in your authentic self is important, and the impact that you can have on somebody else's life is this. I was sitting on my back porch. They had 2 block parties going on in Dreamland. And it was about 6 young kids. I think the oldest one was probably 18 or 19. When they got out the car, they had the red cups and the hot pans. They said, hey, Miss Tammy, hey, we love you. We seen you on TV. We love you. That right there, if those kids watch TV long enough to see me, then I impacted their lives. 18-year-olds, they don't be looking at TV like that. And I know that I've touched somebody's life. So when a group of us, a group of ladies, founded Rural Women in Action, we dedicated ourselves to meet the people where they are, not to be way up here, but to be right here where if you're here, we're here. If you're here, we're here. So the only thing that I could say in my closing is, Reverend Jesse Jackson, y'all, let's keep hope alive.
Hey. All right, so I'm going to be coming from this mainly from the lane of drugs and mental illness, but specifically of being a former drug addict. I'm 10 years sober right now. 10 years ago, I was living, thank you. 10 years ago, I was living in a squat. I was separated. I had a 10th grade education. I had no job. I had nothing. And now I'm sitting on it's just so bizarre to me that I'm sitting on a stage at Howard University with a degree and a career, and, you know, my marriage is back together. I own a home. How weird is that? So just seeing how long that changed. And when I first got things together, like, this is where, like, storytelling is so important to me. Because when I first started, I went into detox primarily with the concept that maybe I could save my marriage and, oh, well, at least my tolerance would be lower. At some point in there, I met somebody who their story, them going through Smart Recovery, which is a non-12-step alternative, really gave me a chance to see something besides 12 steps or death. No offense to anybody who does 12 steps. Everything has about a 90% failure rate. And that's not because everything is 90% bad. That's because there's about 1,000 things, and each one works for about 10% of the people, and people fit where they fit. So it became a big deal to me to be able to be out there and sharing what changed my life. I went back to school for social work. And in social work classes, if anybody's ever been through social work school, every other thing they're talking about, do not disclose anything. Don't talk about anything. Don't have a picture of your family. If you go to a party and someone's in there, turn around and leave. And that just isn't right to me, because my only credibility is who I am. My credibility is that I've been there and been through things, and that I relate to people, and that on both sides, that I understand both sides of the fence on things. And on one side, I know what it's like to be on the streets, and I know what it's like to be a homeowner. But also, I know when I'm talking to people who are very much, well, isn't this harm reduction just enabling? Isn't this and that? The one thing I like to point out is that I have all this. The people are talking to me, asking me to speak places, paying me to speak places. I have respect, and yet the main thing I did to ever reach that point was not die. And when people say things like that, they're saying to me, because there's a couple of moments where I could have died, and there's a couple of moments where I'd still be sitting in prison right now if things just went a little too the wrong way. So I want to be there to be able to tell those stories and disclose things, or share the stories that brought me here, and to actually be able to connect with people, because that's what we all have is our stories. What we all have is who we are and what we went through. And also, we need to destigmatize everything that way. Because when it comes down to it, like drugs, another reason coming from this angle is stigma kills in everything. Stigma kills. I've lost clients because they relapsed, but they were so ashamed they were out there on their own, not around other people. There are a lot of things in the addiction, people work in the addiction field who, because your job is tied to being sober, they are too ashamed to admit that they relapsed, so they end up using alone and dying. Right now we're in a situation with drugs where asking for help is admitting to a felony. And the more likely you are to get consequences for that felony, the less likely you are to ask for help. I saw the numbers with the first speaker about the black population and more deaths. Well, in drug use, we're sitting here at 46% of the population in D.C. is black, and 88% of drug deaths are black. And it's important for me as a white person to be able to share my story that the reason for that is absolutely not that white people use less drugs. I promise you that is not it. So I guess that's it. I'm here to talk and to talk about what I've been through, and hopefully somebody can get something out of it.
Thank you to each of our panelists. So before I open it up for questions, aren't we glad that Daniel decided to take the Uber and join us this morning? Yes, we appreciate that. And learning about how you use humor as a way to have others relate to you and you relate to them. We most certainly appreciate you noting that. As I look at some of the sisters here that have the Language Matters t-shirts, thank y'all for representing with yes, go ahead and show. Language Matters, absolutely. Yes, so that really resonated with what Tammy was saying about, when she was sharing her own story about the word disclose versus thinking about sharing her story, and how she recognized that the actual words that you use do matter, why she was internalizing that stigma, and why she's very, intentional in the language that she used, and I encourage us all to do the same. So thank you, Johnny, for really reminding us of, what we have is our lived experiences. Yes. So yes, here we are as a bunch of, HIV activists, practitioners, clinicians, researchers, and yes, we care about policy implications. Yes, we want to know what your research question is, right? But we also have to remember that stories, the lived experiences is data, right? And that literally is driving the educational programs and evaluations and the policy and practice that we have. So that said, if you have a question, we do invite you to come to the middle aisle. There is a microphone. You can just come on up. You can briefly share who you are, and then you can direct your question to one of the panelists on the stage.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Michelle Harris, and I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm also part of the PPN board members, and I am the Ryan White Chair in Marion County. My question is, how do we keep us from self-stigmatizing ourselves about little things? It's like, I'm too fat, I'm too this, I'm too that. All of those stigmas add up to bigger stigmas. Once we stop stigmatizing ourselves, I think it can do a better job. But it's like we have to stop stigmatizing ourselves, first of all. And I definitely agree with you. You have to be able to meet everyone where they are so that we can get past all of that. None of us are perfect. And we all have a past. We might not like that past, but we've come from that. So we can't keep holding it over on our own heads or over anyone else's head.
All right, thank you for the question. Did you want to start, Tammy?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Me and another young lady was doing a group. And this particular group, these young ladies were in intensive treatment for use of alcohol and drugs. So we did an icebreaker, and the question was, what do you do when you get up? What do you say to yourself when you get up in the morning, right? And this one young lady, she had lost her children, lost her home. The husband cheated and left, and she was addicted to meth. And she shook her head and flipped her hair back, and she said, Miss Tammy, this is what I say. I damn look good in the morning. And I'm like, with all that going on, this is what you say to yourself? She said, in spite of it all, I have got to love me. I can just only leave you with that.
I don't know if you wanted another answer, but it's going to be a balance. There's a balance within our heads. And as you can see up here, we're not just anything, fill in the blank. We're not just. There's all these different things. We come with a lot. And my brain carries a lot. They should charge me extra on the plane for everything I brought with me. But there's that one that woke up in the morning and I was like, hey, I'm in DC. This is like my 5th or 6th trip to DC this year. And I love this DC. And I'm like, yes, we're in DC and it's beautiful and it's fall and it's wonderful. And then the other brain is like, no. Like, no, dude, you're gonna make a fool of yourself. No one's gonna wanna listen to you. Why are you even here? And then the other side of my brain goes, but they flew you here. Someone paid for your ticket to be here. So they must want you. And then the other brain goes, no, it's because they're gonna make fun of you. Someone's gonna say that you said something stupid, which I probably will anyway. But, so there has to be a balance. And I think as long as there's a mantra that I say in the mornings, is I start with, I stand in my reality. And I have to be true about what my reality is today. And my reality today was that I was a little fearful. I was a little fearful. I'm a little cocky too. I'm not gonna lie. So that Garza side of me is like, you go, boy. Put on your great suit and just go out there. But then there's the other part that's like, oh my God, I'm so scared. But then I hear their stories and I'm like, okay, I'm good. Miss Tammy, I saw her this morning. She waved at me. She's like, she had a T-shirt for me. I was like, yes. I love T-shirts. So find the balance. I don't know where the lady went with the hat, but find your balance, and that's where stigma, we can tear it down. Thank you.
I think part of it for me is, and I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome with anything I do. Like I said, it's still very fresh and not lost on me and new to me where I was very recently. And I think a lot of it is for me to not like self-stigma is to really sit there and try to look outside. I love my clients. I love my friends, my clients. I feel like there's so much strength and so much they've accomplished and are doing. And I just got to remind myself always to give myself the grace I give others. It's a conscious effort to remember that.
Hi, my name is Brian Jones from Cleveland, Ohio. I have an organization called the Sankofa HIV Initiative and also the founder of the DIRT Advocacy Movement. And DIRT is an acronym for Direct, Inspiring, Reachable, and Teachable. I don't do grassroots advocacy, I do DIRT advocacy. Because in the spaces where I advocate, I have to cultivate that dirt before the grass can grow. There were so many wonderful things that have been said here today. There's stigma in everything, first of all. Stigma in being too light, too tall, too dark, too short. Until we start talking about the systemic and structural disparities that exist, HIV is just a symptom of the larger problem. We know that. And disclosure for me is a stigmatized word because the definition of disclosure is new or secret information. My status is not a secret. It's mine to share. It's more empowering to share your status than to have someone tell you you have to. And we understand that these laws do that. Now, in reference to the laws, the government can't have it both ways. On one hand, when it comes to giving us health care, they say it's a manageable chronic condition. But when it comes to prosecuting us, they say we hand down a death sentence. So which is going to be a chronic manageable condition, or is it going to be a death sentence when it comes to prosecuting us? And for me, I don't have a story. People want you to come tell your story. A story is something that amuses you or here for your amusement. I'm not here to amuse you. I've got immense insight into the battle of HIV and AIDS. I've been diagnosed going into my 41st year, and if I don't have something to say, something is truly wrong. And sometimes people want you to mute your voice, and I work like this. If I got to be uncomfortable in the room, everybody in the whole damn room going to be uncomfortable. And she talked about meeting people where they are. Many people who do this work can't meet them where they are because they've never been where they at. And that's why our lived experiences are so important. Bring me in. And the gentleman, and lastly, I'm going to say this because I can go on and on. The gentleman was talking about until we start having people. Black folks have never controlled our narrative when it comes to HIV and AIDS. Until we start being allowed to control our own narrative, not being allowed, but taking the horse by the reins and controlling our own narrative and allowing us to control our own money, we're never going to get hold of this fight. And they say ending the epidemic. They're not ending no epidemic, not for us. Maybe for little Sally and Jane out in the suburbs. But ending what for who is my question.
So thank you for sharing that. So is your question about, is it possible? So in the strategies that we hear about U equals U and kind of like these national and global efforts, it sounds as if the question is who are we actually aiming to serve in the epidemic for who? In your opinion, do you feel as if the communities that you represent are included in that in the efforts to end the epidemic?
That's not a hard question, but the reason why it's taken me a minute because I represent the rural area, but I also represent people living and those who are not living with HIV, right? So I'm going to specifically, if you all don't mind, that I talk about the people in the rural area, okay? So for so long, and I don't want to you know I love you. I don't want to mispronounce your name. When you brought up McAllister, I was at a conference and she was there, and I was just learning how to, do things. And I kept asking her, what about the rural area? And this was like 20 years ago. What about the rural area? Because we were left out of the equation, we were left behind, and I felt for the people living with HIV was just left out. No support groups, lack of resources. Okay, so what do we do? Some people say for those communities or for those populations. And then the women and men there, they got to drive 60 miles to go to a doctor. 60 miles because they want to go to a support group. So I say create safe spaces in the areas that you live in. It is okay to learn how to do a needs assessment and ask the people, what can I do? What is needed here? What can I be a part of with you? Start creating. One of my mentors, and it's safe to call her name, Wahida Shabazz, says, nobody is coming to save us. We got to learn how to save ourselves. I'm going to put a period behind that.
We're who we've been waiting for.
Can I? Oh.
Who we've been waiting for, okay.
And so I'm probably preaching to the choir with this, and I see your hand, you'll go next, is that, many of us in this room are representing the very, a range of communities, and so that to the point that was raised that, we can save ourselves. Do you know that PACHA, the Presidential Advisory Committee for HIV and AIDS, are actually accepting nominations right now, so that is really important to be in that room, to actually have that space. And then also the DCCFAR is another opportunity for those interested. And you know what? You feel like the communities that you're representing actually don't have that representation. You don't see that when you look at policies, and when you actually look at messaging around PrEP and ART, then actually seek out opportunities so that you can get funded to actually bring those initiatives to your community. And that's literally what the DCCFAR is for, to provide you with the grooming so that you can be eligible for competitive funding. So I see you're next. Go ahead, please introduce yourselves and go ahead and pose a question for our panel.
Hi, my name is Naima O'Neill. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm also a social worker. So my question, I guess, is, do you think that we created stigma unintentionally? And do you think that the fact that we separate HIV from other STIs is a double-edged sword? Because we want people to say all STIs, but then we focus only on HIV. So do you all, as the panelists, think that creates stigma by separating HIV from other STIs? Because STIs are STIs, I think. And because we specialize, and I know we get funding exclusively for doing HIV, but does that also create a level of stigma? That's my question.
Well, I would go ahead and say, when you say, do we create stigma ourselves, I don't know that we, people in this room, or anything created stigma, but it was created. It was manufactured. And rather it's all the same or anything, I think a lot of it is the separation is to address that manufactured stigma that came because this was, this all came out during the Reagan administration, and the way it was treated then, it was kind of, the line was drawn right there. So I don't really have an answer, but I do think that there is a manufactured stigma, and the stigma is just like drugs, just like any of it, and that it separates out because it's a dual thing to fight, both the actual issue and the stigma that's been manufactured.
We have come a long way. In the beginning, the only thing that we could talk about, or they could talk about, is the word AIDS. That was the focus, and everything else was left out, mental health and substance abuse and, a whole lot of other different things. But we have come a long way. We are addressing issues today that we should have addressed in the beginning of the epidemic. So, for me, I try my best not to stay stuck, but try to provide or get with a group of people, organizations, and provide solutions that can assist other people going through personal stigma and shame. We've come a long way. So we should give ourselves a hand clap of praise on that. We've come a long way. And stigma is going to always exist, but it's how an individual deal with stigma. Thank you.
So I'm going to give you just a quick story. So when I was diagnosed 2000, I'm 29 years old when I was diagnosed. I'm in the hospital. I can't walk because I'm so weak. AIDS is on my record. The priest for the Catholics, the priest had already come into my room to see if I wanted to talk. And so I was like, okay, this is it. So right before that, when the doctor comes in and says, hey, I have your results, my parents are there, my mom, my dad, my sister, and he's like, can they leave? I'm like, no, they're my family, let them stay. Doctor says, you have AIDS. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't completely clear on what that meant, but I was concerned. I was like, this is where I say I'm a little nuts up here. I had lost my hair a little bit. I'm like, is my hair gonna grow back? And the doctor was like, yes, but you understand you have AIDS. I said, cool. Will I be able to walk out of here? He's like, well, we're going to give you some physical therapy, but I'm sure you'll be able to walk out of here. I'm like, okay, that's great. Thank you. He's like, but are you understanding you have AIDS? I'm like, okay. I said, but isn't there medications? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so my hair's coming back. I'll be able to walk, and there's medications. Like, I'm good. And the doctor kept saying, but you know you have AIDS. And I look back at that moment, and I'm so glad I was delusional about what was happening, because I didn't allow him to make me a victim of the situation. I'm the same, I think, funny person I am now that I've always been. I've always been a smart ass since I was a kid. But I think that's what saved me from taking it on and going, oh my God, I have AIDS. My life is over as I know it. In my head, I was just like, just give me back the necessities. Let me walk out of here, let me have my hair, and give me the meds. I'm out of here, like I'm good. And I think that's what really saved me from falling into the victimhood. And again, like the three of us, this is my story. This is my story. I didn't fall into it. So what I teach as a peer counselor, what I do as an advocate, sometimes as an advocate, usually as an instigator in the community, is do not fall victim to the things that society, because of where I come from, religion, culture, and social norms tells us. As a Latino, just because I'm gay, I'm less man than anybody. Yeah, just because I have HIV, I'm less of a person. And then religion is like, well, you're going to hell anyway. So I'm like, if I'm going to go to hell, I'm going to have a good time while I'm here, right? Yes, you can clap at that one. Thank you. I do have a good life. But so that's been part of it. So what I teach people who come to me now who are newly diagnosed is, do not fall stigma. Do not fall to what society keeps telling us about. And exactly, nobody's going to come and tell you you're awesome. But you got to start with you. So this morning, the dual dilemma, but I'm here. So something went over. But going back just to something the gentleman said, we don't come into advocacy. And I believe that HIV advocates, you don't come into it, you're called into it. You're called into HIV, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of it, you're like, I'm in DC marching? How did I get here? Like, how did this happen? So once you're in here, but nobody tells us it's easy. Nobody. Speak to anybody who's been doing advocacy for over 15, 20 years. It's not easy. I'm still fighting fights that I fought the first day I was diagnosed. And we might be fighting them for a long time, but you have a choice. You can go back and work 9 to 5 somewhere, or you can stay in the fight. So you can see up here, we're still in the fight. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Reverend Dr. Sandy Bailey Gwynn, Foundations for Living. I am from a beautiful rural community by the name of Jefferson, Georgia. Question: what would you like to tell a faith leader that wants to work with you and partner with you from a good place?
You know, for me, I'm speaking for me. I'm an usher on the usher board at my church. And it may be 2 days my words, maybe 4, let me just be honest, 4 days my words are unsavory and I have to repent. The church is, I'm not saying, no, I'm just saying the church is very, they pick and choose. And I don't want to make this into a black and white conversation, but I'm speaking to the black churches. They can accept a 14, 15-year-old girl in the congregation pregnant, and nobody had a conversation with her about unprotected sex. But as a person as myself come in with an initial diagnosis of AIDS, they call it advanced HIV, they don't want you to crank up a conversation. They pick and choose and put people in categories, and when it is convenient for them, then they need you. Okay? They want to have the conversation, like when World AIDS Day, let's find somebody to speak on where we'll get tipped. No. Because the motives, the spiritual motives are not right. As a faith leader, and I'm going to say it like this, if it's a faith leader that cannot share the experiences of living with the diagnosis of HIV or advanced HIV, then the narrative is going to have to be very different. The only way that I see for me is to align with faith-based leaders is that I could never make it about me and whoever's the head of the church. I have to make it about the people that I'm serving. Half of the time when the board members of Rural Women in Action is doing work, I'm on a whole nother job. And if everybody on the team that I work with doesn't have a pure motive from the heart, I have no problem to say, this ain't working for you. A faith leader can walk beside us. A powerful faith leader can walk behind us, because black folks look for the church where they could go cry, share, and all of the above, but we don't have that everywhere in the black churches. The black churches want to tell our story through the text on the pulpit, and my head be like, so in order for a faith leader to work with Rural Women in Action, I'm just speaking for Rural Women in Action, we got to understand we're serving the people. And our motives has got to be for the people, and it has got to be pure. And if you're coming from a spiritual standpoint, I don't believe God is going to let you do anything otherwise but walk beside us or behind us when we fall, because we need to reach out to the heavens. Thank y'all for letting me share that.
I just wanted to say on that your actions and how you treat people are being seen and matters so much. I grew up Catholic, and I came 4.5 years ago. Before I started working for HIPS, I had nothing but negative things to say about religion at all. I thought it was all just destructive. But seeing people who I've worked with in the communities, faith leaders who work in harm reduction with HIV, with drugs, with all of that, and seeing how it is a force for good, really it's turned my view on religion around completely. Like, I may still not believe everything, but I definitely now have nothing but, I don't automatically judge someone for being part of a religion. I have a lot of respect for a lot of faith leaders that religious, and the only thing was watching how they treated people was so different than watching how Catholicism treated me and anybody I knew back then.
And I'll just finish. I've had the pleasure of speaking at several churches throughout Southern California, and usually yes, World AIDS Day is their favorite. Like, yay, we need somebody to speak. And I'm like, what happens the other 364 days of the year? We're still out there. And the conversations that I usually have with them afterwards is like, we're here all the time. We're still part of the community, and particularly raised Catholic, para mi gente, it can be difficult in the Latin Catholic churches to make that connection. But I'm like, hey, we're here all the time. We still need the word. And even though I'm part religious and part spiritual, I still believe in God, and I still believe that He watches over me. He wouldn't have me here if He didn't. And there's a plan for me. And I know the universe lays the path, but God opens those doors, and I got to go through. And having those honest conversations goes, I don't say dude to them, but dude, like I'm still a child of God. Like, can you open that door for me too? And then just having those heart-to-heart conversations. And I don't want to end this without saying, Patricia Houston, thank you so much for putting us together.
Yes.
Where is she? There she is. Yes. Thank you so much for putting this panel together. And thank you, Howard University, for opening the doors for us. And thank you for moderating the session. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry. So Patty and Dr. Rana, I know we're at time. Did you still want to continue on with the question, or what do you? Okay.
First of all, I want to say congratulations on y'all's sobriety. It is a hard thing to do, and as an addict, I look up to you guys a lot. But I wanted to ask. So a lot of times I say if we want to promote education in our societies as like a whole together, we should start with our children, because once we die, they're all we have left. But a lot of times I notice, like, when we try to educate our people, our children, a lot of adults, like, they kick us out. They don't want us to, like, at all whatsoever. I think of drag queens. A drag queen read a book to some children and suddenly they're molesters, you know, like the stigma, they just enforce it really hard. So I guess my question is, how do you think we can get adults to let us, like, stigmatize people, educate their children or the children around us?
So before we answer that question, thank you for the question. Do you mind passing the mic? You had a question too? For the sake of time, we'll just take both of the questions and then you can decide which question you're going to respond to. Yes.
Faith-based leader. Just as you all have opened the door for people to have NA, CA, and AA meetings in the church, the question being posed to you all, will y'all open the door for people living with to have meetings within y'all sanctuary?
Yes, sir.
So I want to take the one, the gentleman. So I do HIV prevention education at high schools in Southern California. So anybody in Southern California, reach out. We found an ally. We had to make a connection. So I do high school seniors, community colleges, and universities. It's a different level of curriculum, but I go and talk and share my story about HIV. I include cancer, mental health, addiction, everything that's part of my story, because I lost my virginity when I was 13, 14. So I remember what it was to be a teenager. And so we go in, but find a connection. Find a community organization that is connected with the schools that can get you in. I've been doing presentations now for about 12 years. And it's really interesting. I've taught at high schools and then seen some of the students at the community colleges, and then actually seen one of those students go into medical school at UCI. So it does work. Is it going to work with everybody? No. And I have to take off my Superman costume at the door because I'm not going to be able to save everybody on the bus. And I had to make peace with that. I had to talk to God and be like, dude, just point me in the direction that I need to go. And he's like, do that. And sometimes there's going to be one student that goes, Mr. Garza, I have a question. You're like, yes, I reached one. And you take the win. And you walk out and you're like, look, I couldn't reach the other 35 students, but I reached one. And you're like, okay, that's a good thing. But connect with organizations, and they'll guide you into it. So, and I didn't get the other question.
It sounds like the question was actually to our Reverend here. I don't know how you feel, you're on the panel, but the question is about opening up the church for NA and just other kind of support groups. So I don't know how you feel, if you feel comfortable.
85% involved in NA, AA meetings of churches. You're willing to do the same thing for people living with HIV.
So I can only speak for myself.
Okay, the mic.
I can only speak for myself as an individual. I do not have a building. I'm a pastor of the people, but I can address to the people that I am connected with. It is going to be somewhat difficult because sometimes we lean only in with HIV. We don't necessarily lean in with the intersections of the congregation, because the congregation is not always dealing with HIV. We're also dealing with mental health. We're dealing with substance use disorder. We're dealing with incarceration. So if we lean in with all the health disparities, or take the top 5, you have a better chance, because the pastor is then thinking, we do have some situations. Because of the stigma that is only attached to HIV, they are more hesitant about that. But they are more open to understanding my congregation are dealing with concerns. So to be honest with you, we are not close to the social deterrents. We just need to be educated on all of them, and HIV being the case. So the education is going to remove the fear of all of it. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay. One final question, and then the other questions you can come up and talk to our panelists. Is there another mic? Oh, we had another question here. Okay, wait. So is it okay if we take? There's like 3 questions in the crowd. How you feel, Patty, with the time? Okay, and we said we're gonna have to cut it after 3 questions. So 1, 2. I feel like. Oh, and 3. Wait. Yes. You here? Yes. You can just pass the mic. So pose your questions, please. Yes. Thank you.
My name is Rossmere Mantry. I'm from a little town you might have heard of called Newark, New Jersey. And we've kind of lost the focus on things. Just like a few years ago, we had the Black Lives Matter. Then it was Brown Lives Matter, Gay Lives Matter, this Lives Matter, that Lives Matter. And the black people were forgotten. Everybody else was taken care of. Now we have AIDS. You just asked a question about transgenders, teaching about that in school. A lot of new things have come up. I used to talk to people about using condoms, respecting your body. Today we're trying to sell PrEP. We're bringing things in about other issues that they're not new, but there's some issues that need to be taken care of with like heterosexual men. We've been forgotten about. I have a coworker out in the department. I'm the oldest in it. I'm the only black, and I'm the only straight. It's 3 Spanish gay guys and 1 Spanish transgender. I have more experience with HIV than any of them. My comments are ignored. We're having World AIDS Day. They're more concerned about having a drag show and giving away little sex toys and things like that. We need to start educating people more and letting people know it's okay to have HIV. See, because like in the beginning, they told us, keep your mouth shut. My sisters told me, don't tell my parents. You know, by me not being able to tell my parents, that's saying I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not ashamed of myself. I let the whole world know I have HIV. I got 5,000 friends on Facebook. All of them know it. You know, I go into the drugstore and like, I have HIV. Can you tell me what can help me gain weight? Just to see the reaction of other people. I want them to know that everybody that has HIV is not a sexual degenerate. I'm not saying because you do different things that you're less than or anything, but we are people too. We're no different than everybody else. Actually, we're a little better. We go to the doctors on a regular. We take care of ourselves. We let people know that we have HIV. There's other people that you'll talk to, they won't even let you know that they got a cold or whatever. You know, so there's nothing wrong with us, but we have to learn to speak up about who we are, and that way we can get all the things that we need. Stop keeping your mouth shut. Speak up. If you have HIV, say it. The hell with everybody else. The hell with who likes you or don't like you. You know, because they're just not going to like you. If you don't want to be bothered with me, that's your loss. You can learn from me. I teach you things that you'll never be able to learn. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for your comment. And maybe we can also address like how we can be very intersectional and, you know, and address a range of identities in one of your comments. Our next question and our final question over here. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Hal McIntyre, and I'm the director of social services for men at Positive People Network. And I want to thank all of y'all because I met you before to a conference, and I met all of y'all. And y'all all my family, you know, brothers and sisters, even from a different mother, you know. Y'all all family. But my question is to you, Tammy. when you removing your stigmas, you know it takes a process, but when you get to something when you feel bad about telling someone about who you really should, and you just have a fear, how do you help that person remove the stigma?
So your question was how do I help someone remove the stigma from them telling concerning me on a personal level, right? Okay, I can answer that. When I began to share my status, for me, it became a work of art because I became the artist. And every stroke of the brush came from me. I became the artist, and I am control. It was easy for me to talk about the jails, the prisons, the IV drug use, and 2 baby daddies and all that mental health. But when I began to share my story, I became the artist of my own life. And that made it so easy for me. And the last time I shared my status, my crown was so high. When I was sharing it, my head was wobbling because I knew I was in control. But when somebody else is painting my narrative, they got to use the right paintbrush because it's my story.
Wow. So I am the last. I have the last question, right? You do. And I become the artist of my life. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. I am an artist. My name is Emilio Aponte Sierra Paretti, and I will be presented this afternoon under my Skin Art Workshop. This international conference on stigma is international. Woo! We are speaking English. Let's talk a little bit another language, maybe Spanish. Hablemos en español. Maybe we're going to put this flavor to the international words. Okay, this question is going to be to my friend, Daniel. And the question I'm going to do in English, but my question is going to be, please, in Spanish. So in that way, maybe we can record that for the rest of the world. And maybe Spanish speaker people can listen in after the conference. So, Danny, could you please summarize? We are the last question, right? Summarize what the stigma is and how we, Latinx, Latinos, Hispanos, we can deal with this very, very challenging situation in our community. ¿Puede por favor resumir qué es estigma y cómo nosotros los latinos, los hispanos, podemos lidiar con esta situación?
Sure, gracias, Emilio. How can we, as Latinos, overcome or I don't think we're ever going to end stigma, number one. Let me just put that out there. Not to be negative, but being realistic, because we are a country of immigrants, and whether we're Latinos or from any other country, we're always going to bring that culture, religion, and social norms, which, let me just add, it's delicious. When we bring all the yummy stuff, when we bring the music, when we bring traditions, I'm a foodie, when we bring the foods, it's awesome. We love it. But when we bring things with us that hold us back from growing in this country. And I had to fight that with my parents. My mom passed away a couple of years ago, but she always fought the growing of progress. We were the last people in my neighborhood to have cable. We were the last people to have a microwave. We were the last people in my neighborhood to have everything. I was like, why are you resisting? And she was like, así no lo hacemos en mi país. That's not how we do it in my country. And I was like, but we're not in Mexico anymore. We're not there. And as I was growing up, I remember the first time I told my mom, when I'm 18, I want to move out and live by myself. She cried. Ya no me quieres. You don't love me anymore. And I was like, it has nothing to do with that. But all my friends want to move out when they're 18. But it's because I was embracing the culture that I lived in now. So one of the things that I tell people, particularly when I work in Latino groups, is tienes que americanizarte un poco. You have to Americanize just a little bit. I'm not saying forget everything. You can't forget everything. I still have things, my religion, my culture, el sabor, la música, the music. Cuando alguien habla en español, when somebody speaks Spanish, my ears perk up. I'm like, oh man, es mi gente. I'm not saying forget everything, but if we gotta let go of the barriers. I'm a life coach too, and in my coaching, it's about breaking down the barriers that are holding us back from growing personally or professionally. So I tell the people I work with, if something within your culture, your religion, or your social norms is stopping you from growing and becoming the person that you want to become, why are you holding on to it? Why? It's like holding on to that toxic relationship that is getting you nowhere. And sometimes the toxic relationship is us. And unless we let it go. So a los latinos, a veces hay que dejar atrás el país para poder crecer aquí. We have to let go of our old country so we can grow here. Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much for a very robust discussion. Thank all of our panelists for their time. And so,
thank you all.
Yes. So, Larry, do you mind taking a picture? They've all agreed to take a picture. Okay, great. Are you gonna do? What do you want to say?
What a delight. Let's give the panel another hand. Miranda, thank you so much. This was awesome.